So thank you so much for letting me be with you this morning. And I understand we've got some people in their vehicles up on the hill. Is that what you call it? Up on the hill? I don't believe it. I need to hear something to know that that's really out there. I need to hear them blow the horns if they're really out there. Blow your horns. Unless I'm deaf, I didn't hear anything. Huh? Okay. Anyhow, it's good to be with you on this Military Sunday. First of all, I want to check if all of those of you who stood up, were any of you Marines? No, you're not a Marine. Did you hear that? She answered. Oh, that was the toy. Do we have any Marines? You got one Marine right here. That's all right, buddy. Get somebody from the Army to sit next to you. If I do use a big word, he'll tell you exactly what it means, okay? Hey, I got to tell you a story about a Marine. This Marine gets on an airplane and down in Southern California. He goes up and sits down in first class, and the flight attendant comes back and says, "Excuse me, sir, let me see your ticket." And she says, "Sir, this ticket is for coach. You're going to have to sit in coach." He said, "Ma'am, I'm a Marine. I'm going to Boston, and I'm sitting in first class." She said, "No, sir, you don't understand." "Ma'am, I'm a Marine. I'm going to Boston. I'm sitting in first class." Shook her head and walked back up to the front of the aircraft. And the other flight attendant there said, "What's the matter?" She said, "You know how Marines are. They're not real bright." She said, "I cannot get this guy to understand that he can't sit in first class with a coach ticket." The flight attendant said, "Don't worry about it. I'm married to a Marine. I'll take care of this." She goes up, kneels down right next to him, whispers in his ear, and he unbuckled that seatbelt, got up and ran back to coach class and buckled up. She came back to the front, and the first flight attendant said, "What did you say to him that I didn't say?" And she said, "Well, I just kneeled down there and I said to him, 'Sir, first class doesn't go to Boston.'" Now, you're going to get that in a minute, brother. For those of you who don't know, my dad spent 32 years with the Marine Corps, and I love the Marine Corps. I'm going to talk to you today by starting and asking you a simple question. Are you doing what God's called you to do? Are you doing what God has called you to do? Now, I know you go to church, you pay your tithes, you've been baptized, maybe you are in a Bible study, or you go to Haiti on a missions trip. All those things are good. But the question is, are you doing what God has called you to do, or are you just following the pattern of the people around you? And I'm coming at this from a military perspective because I want to address with you 5 concepts for Christians to ponder, and I call it reflections on the modern warrior ethos. Here's the 5 things. Sua sponte, Deo presso liber, ut pro sim, and molan lebe. How many of you know at least one of them? Huh? And that one, I can bet you I know which one it is. But we're going to talk about each one of them. But I'm just asking you to continue as we go through this to ponder. Are you doing what God's called you to do? So let's go to the first one. Sua sponte. This I freely give. It can also be translated as on my own accord. You know, in World War II, the Japanese were trying to come through the jungles of Burma to get into China. They were attacking the forces of General Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek was our ally. He was not a communist, he was a nationalist, and they wanted to get in. The Japanese wanted to get through the Burma jungles and get into China so that they could overrun and destroy Chiang Kai-shek's forces. Chiang Kai-shek was dug in on the border there, defending against the Japanese, and the U.S. Army knew that they needed to put troops in there. They needed troops in there to fight the Japanese, to get in behind the Japanese lines and to prevent them from going into China and destroying Chiang Kai-shek's forces. The problem was we had no experience in jungle training. So they created a new theater called the China, Burma, India Theater. You hear about the Atlantic Theater and the Pacific and the Western Pacific theaters. But this was the China, Burma, India Theater, and you hear very much about it. You don't hear much in terms of World War II history about this. It was an incredible theory. And they began to select volunteers, all volunteers, to form an organization that would go into those jungles and that would go in behind the Japanese lines and would fight the Japanese and stop them from overrunning Chiang Kai-shek. All volunteers. They eventually recruited 3,000 men. They called themselves Merrill's Marauders. Can you see on the, and for those of you who are just listening, I do have some PowerPoints here. But this is what they called themselves. They called themselves Merrill's Marauders. And that is because the commander of this organization was Brigadier General Frank D. Merrill. And he recruited these 3,000 people. None of them were forced into this. And in 1943, they went into the jungles of Burma. Hey, Buck, it's good to see you. You hiding over there, huh? They went into the jungles of Burma, and in 10 months, they came out of the Burma jungles, and that's what was left. That's what was left standing, fighting, able to fight. 3,000 men went in, and look, this is what came out. Think about that. And these men gave their lives freely. These men went in there, none of them had to go because it was an all-volunteer unit, but they went into the Burma jungles freely. And all of them weren't killed. Many of them were just incapacitated, not only by the Japanese, but by the jungle itself. Well, who carries that mantra today? The Rangers, 75th Ranger Regiment. Can you see at the bottom of that coin for the 75th Ranger Regiment? Sua sponte, this I freely give. As a young officer, a lieutenant, I had the privilege of being one of the members of the initial Ranger Battalion that was formed at Fort Stewart, Georgia. I remember our battalion commander, who ultimately went on to be a 2-star general. He would stand up on a platform at formation every morning when we were getting ready to do our physical training, and he would say to us, men, he would say, you follow in the footsteps of Merrill's Marauders, don't you ever besmirch their legacy. Remember, you have a proud tradition that went ahead of you. Now you make us proud. And he would say, the day may come when your country will call on you to risk your life or sacrifice your life for the Constitution that you took an oath to, just like Merrill's Marauders. Are you ready for that? Are you prepared? Will you do it when that time comes? You know what? Jesus went to Calvary freely. As he knelt and prayed there, Father, if it be thy will, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but that. He went to Calvary freely. And he gave his life there on that cross freely. And the message that we need to be taking to the world is sua sponte, that he gave his life freely. Let me tell you something. I grew up in the Pentecostal Holiness Church, little country church down in Craven County. But let me tell you something. It was the most legalistic place that you can imagine. I'd never in my life saw my mother wear makeup. I was not liberated from my upbringing until I got to Northwood Temple, where people focused on their relationship with Jesus, where people accepted that Jesus was the Lord of their lives. Romans says, if we confess with our mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord and believe in our heart that God raised him from the dead, we will be saved. Folks, we need to be taking that message, not just to Africa and Asia and the Caribbean. We need to be taking it to the people here in America. And the majority of the people in a Christian church, born-again believers, never lead one person to Christ. And I think that is something that we have to look at. Because we are the body of Christ. And our message should be sua sponte. Jesus gave his life for you. You can't earn it. And that's what I grew up thinking I had to do, was earn my salvation. Honestly, until I got here to Northwood Temple. It's a works-based theology. Good people. Good, godly people. Meaning well. But it's about works, not about the relationship with Jesus. I'm not being critical of the people. I'm just being critical of some of the stuff that I saw. And this old lady walked up to me one day and said, well, I'll just tell you what. I think that football's a sin. And I said, well, I'm going to hell. Because my parents had no money and I had no way to go to college except to go play football at Virginia Tech. That was the way I get an education. And that's when I just gave up. I quit. I quit trying. Are you taking that message? Are you taking sua sponte? Are you taking that message? Are you talking to people? I didn't mean are you in their face. I'm saying, are you talking to people about the fact that Jesus gave his life freely? I love the Rangers. It was a great privilege to be part of them. Del Presso Liber, also in World War II, we started putting in these teams called the Office of Strategic Services. They jump in behind the German lines in occupied France and Belgium and Italy, and they would organize a resistance movement, and they would blow up railroads, and they would blow up bridges and communications, and then they'd send intelligence back to the British headquarters and the American headquarters back in Britain. And but their mission there was to free the oppressed. So after the war, the U.S. Army started taking a survey, and they said, you know what? Our shortcoming right now is that we don't have the kind of capability that the OSS represented, Office of Strategic Services, to go in and liberate people. And we need that, so they decided that they would form an organization with the motto of Del Presso Liber, to free the oppressed. You see it all over Fayetteville. You see it everywhere here because you got all the Green Berets here. I had the privilege of commanding them, all 10,000 of them, and I think there are more of them now. Del Presso Liber, I was in Chicago doing a men's conference, and there was a little black boy up there. Somebody had paid $30 a piece to bring these black children out of the hood there in Chicago, and this little black boy was there, and I was drawn to him, and I was in there speaking to all 30 of them, and I called that little black boy over, and I said, son, I know you aren't going to understand this, but I said, God has a calling on you. Now you seek God and find out what he's calling you to do. And a little while later, he came up to me and he said, can I talk to you? And I got up from a book table and I went outside with him, and he said, sir, my name is DeAndrea. And he said, I don't know who my father is. And he said, but I see my mother 4 times a year because she's in prison. And he said, but I'm thinking of committing suicide. Oh, my gosh. I said, son, what's the matter? He said, the gangs in my neighborhood, they all beat me up. They all want me to join them, and they beat me up. And I said, DeAndrea, you come back in here in the auditorium with me. When I start back, I want to do something. So I brought him back in there, and when we started back, I brought him forward, and I said, men, reach your hands out here towards him. Let's free him from this oppression that he's living under right now. And I laid my hands on him. I began to bless him, and these men began to go to war for this boy and for deliverance from what he was going through. And then I said, when I finished, and he was weeping, and you know how a new Christian is. he was weeping, and I said, no, I need one of you men to go mentor him. I need one of you men that's willing to mentor him. And nobody raised their hand. And I said, come on, somebody, God's calling one of you guys out here. And there was 500 guys in there. And finally one guy raised his hand and said, I'll do it. He had his son with him, white guy. Nobody wanted to go into the hood. That was the problem. And this guy said, I'll mentor him. And he came up and we got everything worked out, and he started mentoring this young. He was freeing the oppressed. That's why we take the message sua sponte, because it de oppresso liber. It frees the oppressed. Ad prosem. You've heard of all the military academies, and you've got 5 major military colleges like VMI, the Citadel, and they all have a motto about service. Ad prosem, that I might serve. And in fact, my alma mater, Virginia Tech, I stood in that formation for 4 years. And the cadre there said to us every time we were in that formation, you just keep in mind, when you graduate from here and you get your commission, you're going to serve the people of America, and it is not about you anymore. It is not about you, because your heart should be asking, how can I serve? Ad prosem, that I might serve. You know what? God has a calling on everybody's life. Some people are afraid, and I was one of those, are afraid to know what that calling is. They will fight it because they're scared. And that's because we don't trust God. And we need to trust God. We need to trust God when He gives us that calling. If we seek His face and He gives us that calling, we need to be prepared to stand up and say, here am I, Lord, send me, just as Isaiah did. Here am I, Lord, send me. And we need to do what God has called us to do. And so frequently, we're just afraid to really seek God because we don't really want to know what He is calling us to do. You feel that calling, but we have to serve. Semper Fidelis, you all know what this one is, always faithful. United States Marine Corps. It's been their motto forever, and they're serious about it. You ask a Marine, are you a former Marine, and what do you say? No, I'm a Marine. I'm a Marine, because they are proud of their tradition. They're proud of what the Marine Corps stands for. And they are faithful, always faithful. One of my best friends, in fact, last weekend I was in Nashville, Tennessee with Ollie North, and he's been a dear friend for over 30 years. But he signs his emails. Semper Fidelis is not just a saying, it's a way of life. Once you know what that calling is, you are obliged to stay with that calling until the Lord releases you from that calling. It's being faithful to the calling that is on your life, to the calling that God has revealed to you. Are you doing what God has called you to do? Mola Nabe, come and take. Where'd that come from? Most of you probably know. It came from a man named Leonidas. He was a king of the Spartans. In 480 BC, Xerxes, the great Persian king, wanted all of what we call Greece today. At that time, it was not a state, not a nation. It was a bunch of small city-states that were bound together by their language and by their common enemy that was Xerxes. Xerxes wanted to overrun them, take over, and the fastest way for Xerxes to get his forces of about 250,000 people there was to come down along the coast. And coming along the coast there, he had to go through a very narrow pass. It was called Thermopylae. The Greeks decided that they would pool their forces and that they would put Xerxes or Leonidas in charge. of defending that and not letting them get into the cities of modern-day Greece, Athens, Thebes, places like that. And so they put King Leonidas in charge. He took 7,000 Greeks out of Athens, and he took 300 Spartans. You know the story, the 300. You've seen it before, the 300. And when they got together, Xerxes sent a runner to Leonidas after 3 days of battle. And the runner said, Xerxes says to tell you, King Leonidas, that you have fought bravely. Now lay down your weapons and we'll let you go home. And Xerxes and Leonidas sent a message back saying, Molan Labay, come and take them. You want my weapons? Come and take them. Let me tell you something. I don't know if you read. I was reading last night when I left here last night. I was reading about what they're doing in the churches, the pastors in Canada especially. And don't think it didn't come into America because it's already here. Pastors, again, more pastors being locked up for preaching the gospel. And the police barged into a church up there and ran everybody out of it and then put the pastor in handcuffs. Molan Labay should be our message. You want to take my faith, come and get it. You see, the Marxist movement in America, one of their objectives is to shut down the church, because Karl Marx was a hardcore atheist, and he said, my objective is to dethrone God and destroy capitalism. And he also said, religion is the opiate of the masses. You cannot be a Marxist, you cannot be a hardcore Marxist if you believe in God, if you believe your rights are inalienable. And that's why they're going after us today, and we have to fight back. We have to stand against this. We have to say to them, Molan Labay, come and take it, because I'm going to fight you. And I was just down in Florida with some pastors that have been fined millions and millions of dollars. One of them you probably have heard of, at least Rob McCoy out in California. And now the court has ruled in their favor, so they don't owe anything. But they fought back. Molan Labay, they said, come on, come and take it. Come and take it. We're going to video everything you do when you get here. You run people out of this church, we're going to put it on video and we're going to show it nationwide, worldwide. Come and take it. And then finally, I'll come to an end, as I'm coming up on the end of my time here. Some people ask me, what was the most rewarding operation I ever ran? And I'm going to tell you, it's not what you think. In 1983, I was sent into Sudan. 5 missionaries had been captured and were being held on top of a mountain called Boma Mountain down in South Sudan. And I had one sergeant with me with a radio, and we were told to go in there and help the Sudanese put together a rescue operation. We trained them. We rehearsed them. We gave them weather. We gave them intelligence. We gave them photographs. And we got them all ready. And I said, okay, guys, you're ready. Now go up there and get those missionaries. Because the longer we waited, the more chance there was those people were going to die up there. And they looked at me and they said, well, you are going with us, aren't you? What do you say? I mean, there's no right. I had no authority to go on the target with them, but, what do you say? Yes. I said, yes. Oh, yeah, I'm going with you. We got on that helicopter early one morning. We hit the top of the mountain up there where these missionaries were, and the first guy that jumped out of the helicopter, first Sudanese, was killed. The next one got hit in the hand, but after that, we owned that mountain, and we killed a bunch of them, but we got 5 missionaries unharmed. We got those 5 missionaries. As we were getting those missionaries off the mountain, getting them loaded on the helicopter, I walked around and looked at how they were living. And I'm going to tell you, it was the most abysmal thing I've ever seen for a Western person to live like that. They lived in literally huts. They had no running water, no electricity, no plumbing, nothing. And guess what? They were educating their children up there. Their children were home on leave, but they were educating their children up there. And it was incredible what I saw up there. And I literally said, God, please don't ever call me to do this. I don't want to do this, God. And I hoped that God would never call me to do that. We brought them back down, and when I got back down off the mountain, I got a call, said, get out of there. The media's on the way down to Juba, South Sudan. The media's on the way. We're sending a plane from the embassy. And I said, okay. Ran down to the airfield, threw our equipment in, and I saw something coming down the road, cutting a trail of dust. And I started to get on up in the plane so we could take off before the media. I knew this was the media, but there was an arm out the window doing like this, and I knew there was something different. I got back down off the plane, and I walked over to the gate, and when they pulled up, it was a Land Rover, and it had the 5 missionaries in it. And I walked out through the gate, and I went up to them, and I said, well, what's the matter? And they were all weeping. They had tears in their eyes. And they said, sir, we didn't have an opportunity to thank you. You left so quickly. And I said, the look on your faces is all the thanks I need. That's all I need. And they said, sir, we want to give you something. That's all we have. And they handed me a Bible that all of them had signed. Let me tell you, the man that ran that missionary station up there was a man named John Haspels. You can find him on the internet. John Haspels. John Haspels grew up on that mountain. He knew what was up there when he took his family up there. And they were they were bringing a message, sua sponte, to a loincloth primitive tribe up there. Why? De oppresso libere, to liberate them from the paganism and the evil demonic worship that was the tradition on top of that mountain. And why were they up there? Well, it's because they'd been called to be up there. Ad prosem, it was their calling. And you know, what's interesting is John Haspels, having grown up there, knew what he was getting into, and he took his family back up there on the top of that mountain because he knew that calling was on his life just like it was on his father's life. And sua sponte, he was faithful to that calling. And then finally, they went back down into their base in Juba. They took a few hot showers, got some hot meals, and guess what they did? They went right back up to the top of that mountain. Why? Their attitude was, Molan Labe, you want to take my mountain? You want to take my calling? Come on, come and take it. But God's with me. He spared me up there before. He'll spare me again. And they went right back up to the top of that mountain. And by the way, if you do look him up, you'll find out that he's been shot. He'd been beaten, all kinds of things. But the calling was on his life to be on top of that mountain, and that's what he did with his children. Are you doing what God's called you to do? I leave you with that today. And I ask you that at this point, I'd like to pray for you. I'd like to pray for God's blessings upon you on this day of Pentecost. And if there is anybody in here that you're not right with Jesus, I would ask you to pray a simple prayer with me and then let somebody on this staff know. So could we bow our heads here? And I want you to pray this prayer out loud with me, and everybody pray it out loud with me. Father, forgive me, for I'm a sinner. I ask you, Lord, to save my soul and wash away all my sins. I thank you, Lord, for saving me. Now, Lord, help me to live for you. What's your calling on my life? Show me, Lord, and give me the strength and the courage and the discernment to do what you call me to do. In Jesus' name. Amen. Now, if you did pray that prayer for the first time, I want you to let somebody on the staff here know. But I just ask you as you leave here to ponder, are you doing what God's called you to do? Is there something that you felt that God has burdened your heart with, but you have not complied? You have not answered that call. Are you doing what God's called you to do? Thank you all for letting me be with you. God bless you.